Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 242, and today, 2 got us one amazing ghost/paranormal story. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. It really helps this channel and podcast grow. This is a story about an old abandoned house in a small town where teenagers hang out. They end up finding something hidden inside, and in the end find something they can't explain. With that being said, turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. Back before my husband was deployed, he made it very clear that he did not want to be kept alive if he was ever to return in a vegetative or quadriplegic state, and I promised to honor his wishes. It hurts to see that desperate, burning resentment in his eyes every time I look at him, but I'm definitely not about to give up the financial aid package I received for providing an in-home care to a disabled veteran. The Second Room in the Basement by HighestBounty. I never really had any reason to be truly scared. Looking back, there isn't one experience I can think of that truly terrified me. I've jumped countless times, from sudden loud noises or catching something moving in my peripheral vision. I can't recall ever fully screaming or shouting. But maybe that's because I'm not a very outspoken person anyway, and would rather mask my feelings from others. I lost my eldest daughter once. She was 2 and we were in B&Q, a hardware store. They have model bathrooms and kitchens. There I am admiring some taps or tiles or whatever it was. I turn around to the shower that she was messing in and poof, gone. That was terrifying, but I wasn't scared, more fanatic. Full disclosure, I found her taking a dump on one of the display toilets. Not my proudest moment having to tell the employees they have to clean up in aisle 6. And side note from 242, that's part of the reason they don't have toilets really on the floor anymore. Your child is not the only one who's done it, and sadly adults have as well. So don't feel so bad about it. Anyway, so I haven't even really been terrified, except once. It happened back when I was 17. I left school that summer and had 6 weeks before starting college. It was baking hot in the small rural town that I lived in. Situated pretty much in the middle of England, it's an old coal mining town, and a bit of British history here. All the mines were closed down, which decimated both the economy and job opportunities of the small pit towns throughout the country. Back to my town. If you're old enough, or at least look old enough, you spend your time in the local pubs. If you're not, you have nothing else to do but roam the streets seeking your own entertainment. Me and my friends were the latter. On the main road through the town, away from the other houses, stood a dilapidated house known as the O'Briens. A 4-story, 6-bedroom mansion compared to all the other houses in town. There was an old couple who lived there who, at this point, had passed away some years prior, called, you guessed it, the O'Briens. They had 2 daughters, had moved abroad, and had never claimed the house, so it just sat for years, building up dust and rotting away. A perfect opportunity for somewhere cool, private, and exciting for 6 teenagers to hang out. The house had a ridiculously big back garden, which was equally ridiculously overgrown. It literally took us a good part of a day to stomp down a pathway through the needles and brush. Once through, there was a garage that we could drop down onto, which we pulled up the roof to gain access. We spent nearly all summer in that house, hanging out, graffitiing the walls, drinking, smoking, you name it. But there was one room that eluded us. From the garage, you headed through a kitchen, which now only consisted of broken windows that had been boarded up, and a damaged set of cabinets on the back wall. You then stepped into a hallway, which looked right through to the front door, with a bathroom and 2 other large rooms on the left-hand side. On the right were the stairs to the second floor. The staircase was built against a wall and had wooden planks running vertically. Directly opposite the kitchen door, built into the back of the staircase, was a large metal door that had been painted white. The paint was now a sickly yellow, dusty color and flaky. The door was locked. It simply wouldn't budge, and looking at the hinges, it opened inwards. The house was big enough that we kind of forgot about the locked door. We spent most of the days up in the 2 rooms on the 3rd floor, away from the road outside, to avoid any passerbys hearing us and phoning the cops. That was until one of the lads decided, for no apparent reason, to light the moth-ridden curtain on fire with a Zippo he had been messing with. The curtain, dust-covered carpet, and old crackling wallpaper went up in seconds. We only made it out by smashing the top window and jumping onto the dirt mound at the side of the garage. I think if adrenaline hadn't been coursing through us, that would have been one hell of a painful fall. We hid in some bushes over the road and watched the fire engine put out the flames, but before it could, it had engulfed the 2nd and 3rd floor. The 2nd was still usable once we got the courage to re-enter the house, but the 3rd was gone. Just like the outer walls and what was left of the roof. Shame, really. We were confined to the bottom floor. The garage was too dark to see in, and only had an old table we found that you normally use to paste on wallpaper. We used it to get in and out of the roof. The kitchen wasn't much brighter, and the front room had a big window that overlooked the footpath and road outside. So that left us a small, bleak back room to chill in, which got boring very quickly. Boredom leads to curiosity, and I noticed that one of the wooden planks on the side of the stairs was loosened, and that there was an open space behind it. Finally, we could see what was behind that metal door. What a mistake that was. They say curiosity killed the cat, but in this instance, it questioned my whole belief. The wooden panels were surprisingly hard to pull off, even for 6 fairly athletic teenagers. So we went out scouting and brought back a few torches, flashlights, and a crowbar. It was still a slog, but we finally managed to remove 2.5 of the panels. Shining the light into the hole revealed another staircase that led downwards. Yet it looked as though it was decades older than the rest of the house. Cobwebs engulfed every surface, and the stench of musk and damp attacked your nostrils if you got anywhere near the hole. After some giddy behavior, some pushed and shoved, and a game of 6-man rock, paper, scissors, I grabbed a torch and slowly stuck my head through the hole. The room was darker than dark, so dark that the beam from the torch could be seen cutting through the blackness. I shone it down the staircase first. It went down deep. The hole we had made was maybe 4 or 5 steps from the door, and there was at least 25 below it. At the bottom, a wall and a doorway to the left. I swung the torch to the right, towards the metal door, not expecting to see what I saw at all. The door was definitely locked, tight, with 3 separate dead locks that ran down the side, all barred. But what caught me by surprise was on the small lip of the top step, pushed firmly against the door, was a really outdated fridge. The one that were square and about waist height. I told the lads that stood behind me and they laughed, thinking I was joking. One by one, they stuck their head in the hole, checking out the bottom stairs, and then the fridge. Each one as confused as myself. I remember sitting down, smoking a cigarette, and debating how and why it would be there. The door clearly opened inwards, which meant the door must have been locked from the inside. Then somehow the fridge put up against it from the inside. We spent the rest of the day checking the garage and surrounding area of the house for a trap door or another entrance/exit to the cellar, but couldn't find anything. We put it down to the sheer size and state of the garden and went home. The next few visits to the house was us trying to decide who would enter the cellar first. No one wanted to, and no matter how many games of rock, paper, scissors we played, it was always best out of the highest number. Until one day, I had enough. We sat in a circle in the other room, messing with stuff and just generally chatting. Except me. I just sat and stared at this hole, this dark void in the wall. Finally, I got up, exclaimed my intentions, took a torch from my pocket, and stepped inside. Everyone else quickly and very excitedly followed. Immediately, the first few layers of the wooden steps just disintegrated under my feet. They turned into a mulch of damp splinters that clung to the soles of my shoes when I lifted my foot. It was worrying, but the stairs seemed sturdy enough. Each step I took downstairs, the temperature dropped rapidly, and the air seemed to get thicker and thicker. The inches of dust that I kicked up didn't help also. Admittedly, I was a little scared, but I had 5 other lads behind me, so it was impossible to turn tail now. I headed down and reached the second to last step. I could see the doorway which led to the open room. Pausing, I regained my courage with a few shaky, deep breaths and stepped through. The room was in a worse state than the stairs. Webs littered the rafters and floorboards above like moss. They hung from the ceiling in clumps, all tarnished with dust. Weirdly, thinking about it now. We never saw any spiders, though. The floor was carpeted in a layer of debris from the rotted wood above, dust and dirt. It was a miracle none of us fell through that floor above. This place was a mess. The room was huge, expanding underneath the bathroom and both rooms on the first floor. And it was dark. There was no light source other than the torches the 3 of us were now carrying. The room stood empty, except for the wooden table smack bang in the middle. No chairs, nothing around it. But on it stood a metal plate cruelly bashed into shape, with the remnants of black goo on it. Next to the plate stood a tall, uncorked green bottle. One of the boys went over to it and picked it up. It sloshed as he did so, with a liquid of deep round and layers of dirt inside. I never smelled it, but apparently it was putrid. At first, we didn't see the other doorway. It was in the corner directly opposite to the one we had entered. No door, just darkness. We tried to shine our torches through it, but they didn't seem to cut through the shadows. It was like there was actually a door there, one that drained the torchlight. For some reason, I didn't muster the courage to go into that room, and neither did anyone else. We simply turned and left, feeling like we had enough adventure for the day. Over the next week or so, we invited girls and other friends to the house, but all refused to enter the basement. We found this hilarious, and would dare one another, more to show off than anything, to go down there either on their own or in pairs, without a flashlight, and see how long they could stay down there. Now, not once did I get scared while I stood in complete darkness down there. It was kind of calming. But none of us ever got the courage to enter the other room. In hindsight, we should have questioned more why the door was metal, or why it was locked from the inside, and how the fridge got up the stairs and placed in front of the door as a barrier from the inside also. But, full of excitement and immaturity, it never crossed our minds. We just assumed that there would be some sort of other exit in the other room which led to the garden. Word quickly went round through the year groups of the old Brian's basement, and we definitely fed the rumors of it being haunted. Teenagers would ask us how to get into the house and for us to show them the barricade door/basement. So, because we thought we were cool, we spent another day making a maze in the garden, squashing pathways down that led away from the garage. We would then invite people into the house, leading them through the garden into the garage and showing them the hole in the stairs. It got quite popular, and we decided to cash in on the opportunity. We told people if they wanted to see the basement, they would have to do the initiation. As they came in, we would have one person sat on the fridge and another at the bottom of the stairs, both with torches, and send the person into the first room, telling them they had to stay in there for 10 minutes, with the torches turned off, and then we would let them out. This went on for a while, and it was fun at first. A lot of people were bolted as soon as the torches were turned off, but some stayed. We cheered them back up the stairs when they completed it. It was a cheesy little ritual we created, but still, everyone refused to go into the other room. When questioned, they just said they didn't feel comfortable, until my little brother and his friend came. They were 2 years younger than us, and initially refused to let anyone who wasn't our age into the house. We were there all the time, and there were 6 of us in the friend group, so it was pretty easy to deter people away if they managed to find the entrance at the garage. But after constant pestering and the initial curiosity of the others dwindling, we decided to invite them along. We made a big deal out of it, taking them to the dilapidated fence at the back of the garden and tying their jumpers around their faces as we led them blindly through the maze of shrubbery and thorns to the garage. It was a decent drop from the hole in the roof, and even though my brother managed it, his friend had to be lowered down by his arms. Once inside, they were met with the stench of smoke that lingered from the floors above. We walked them through the kitchen and showed them to the makeshift entrance to the basement. We told them the story of the metal door and how it didn't make sense. It gave them the option of staying in the first room in pitch black for 10 minutes or go into the second room in pitch black for 5 minutes. An offer a lot of people initially picked until they got down the staircase. "Second room," they said in unison. We all laughed, expecting them to change their minds immediately. One of the lads slipped through the hole in the wooden boards and turned right, heading up the stairs and positioning himself on the fridge. I went through next and positioned myself at the foot of the stairs. I'd just like to say, at this point, all of us regulars felt completely comfortable going down to the bottom of the stairs practically alone. We all taken it in turns when bringing people down here, and had done it numerous times each, so this time was no different. There was a giddy, nervous atmosphere when the 2 youngest entered the staircases. The torches we used were cheap ones, and we gotten them from the market, so they cast an eerie yellow glow. Slowly, my brother and his friend made it down the stairs, clearly attempting to show face and act unmoved by the state of the rot, decaying wood around them. But as they trenched through the mulch, they stuck close together. They took their time, so much so that the guy at the top shouted for them to hurry, and both nearly shit their pants. When they finally got to me, I told them that this was the first room, shining the torch around the room through the doorway, and that they were going to go into the next one, aim my beam through the darkness to the frame on the other door. The room was a decent size, and as I stated, the torches were cheap, but I remember taking notice that the beam that cut through the first room never seemed to illuminate the second room at all, as if there was an object obscuring its path. My brother's friend walked into the room, and as my brother walked past me, I grabbed his shoulder and told him that he didn't have to do this, and if he did, then he could come out whenever. With a nod and a dismissive wave, he followed his friend. They crossed the room, past the table, and disappeared through the second doorway, as if they were walking through a dark stage curtain. I hit the button on my Kaisun watch and started the countdown for 5 minutes. I then aimed the beam of my torch up the staircase. The guy sitting on the fridge smiled excitedly and looked at his watch. "I really need to piss, dude. I'll be right back," he said, jumping down and disappearing back through the gap. I stood at the bottom of those steps for what seemed like forever. I could hear faint giggles from across the first room. They seemed muffled, as if hearing voices from behind a door. "How long left?" my brother's voice shouted. 3.5 minutes, I replied, checking my watch. Now, in the basement, despite it obviously being underground, there was never an uncomfortable temperature. It was colder than upstairs, but had no bite. There was never a chill, and while being down there countless amount of times, not once had any of us felt any sort of breeze. But, and this memory still haunts me a little, especially when there is a suddenly shift in temperature, I noticed that I became very cold stood at the bottom of the stairs, to the point where I could see my breath when I checked the time against the light on my watch face. The mumbles from the other room had stopped also. I tried to focus on them, see if I could hear any movement or the nervous noises they had been making before, but nothing. I remember getting freaked out. I don't know what about, but I could feel my heart beating faster. The hairs on my arms and the back of my neck stood on end. I turned on the torch and stepped into the first room. "Yo, you guys alright?" I called out. Nothing. No reply. "Oh, stop fucking about. Time's up," I called again. And again, no reply. I shone the torch through the doorway of the second room, but just like before, it was as if the beam cut through the first room and then stopped at that doorway. I crept closer, calling my brother's name, but he never replied. Then, as clear as day, so loud it hurt my ears after the silence, a voice, deep, brash, and distorted, as if the sound had been twisted, bellowed. "Leave now!" I froze on the spot, eyes fixated on the doorway. Then, emerging from the gloom, ran my brother and his friend, both as white as snow, both with tears and snot streaming down their faces. The look of pure terror on their face is something I have never been able to get rid of. They bolted straight past me, which snapped me out of my trance, and I followed suit. Before we could reach the doorway to the stairs, the sound of crashing came from the stairway. 4 ridiculously loud bangs, the noise of snapping wood. The fridge was embedded into the wall at the bottom of the staircase. Without stopping, we all scrambled over it. The staircase itself was completely a mess. Large splinters of wood stuck up like spikes. Luckily, I don't know how, we managed to climb up on our hands and feet without injury. Halfway up, I looked towards the hole in the wall, praying it would be in reaching distance. Both the young lads were in front of me, both sobbing and screaming. Both ran straight past the hole in the wall, the metal door, locked before and with no key, we looked everywhere for it, stood open. Light from the garage exit spilled through the kitchen and down into the basement, as if it's showing us the quickest way out. Instinct had set in by this point, and all 3 of us darted through the door, onto the table, and up through the garage. My brother's friend, too small to get down on his own, managed to get out without help. We ran through the garden maze. At some point, I had to grab hold of my brother to stop him from going down one of the many dead ends we had created, and, without word, took the lead. We raced to the fence, squeezed through the hole, and collapsed on the field behind the property. I looked around, and there, also sat on the grass, staring at the three of us, was everyone else who had been in the house. No one said a word. Everyone looked as scared as each other, except for the two younger boys. They wept for a long time, actually, as we all just sat there in silence and let them do it. Once they had stopped, we got up without a word and went home. My brother said nothing to me on the way, or when we got back. He went into his room, and I went into mine, and that was the end of that. No one went into that house again. It stood there for a year or two, then was demolished. Apparently one of the daughters had finally come over and claimed the land, only to sell it to some new building project. Now, a group of houses sit where the garden and house were. Nice-looking houses, to be fair. My brother still refuses to walk past that estate. They never built on the land directly above the cellar. Apparently, I've never actually had this confirmed, but the builders refused to fill the cellar in for some reason. Just bricked it up and left it open space despite being able to fit a perfectly good house on there. We only brought it up once within the friend group, and only because I convinced myself that it had to be one of them that opened the door somehow and moved the fridge. But they all swore it wasn't. They said that as soon as it started getting really cold in the house, they got spooked. They heard the voice and heard the kitchen, noticed the door was open when they heard the loud bang and bolted. I tried asking my brother about the room, but he completely shut down when I did. He quickly stopped being friends with the kid that went down with him, said they no longer had anything relevant to talk about. The picture shows the house after the fire. You can see the smashed window from the fire brigade, and the black from the smoke around the top windows. The garage is behind, can't see it in the photo. The other photo is of cleared land and the last picture of the new build with the oblivious patch of grass where the basement would be. Owning a chimpanzee is a lot more expensive than I thought it would be. I spent $200 a month on food, $500 on toys, and $450,000 on facial reconstruction surgery. And with that, our time together is coming to an end. I would like to thank the user who let me read their story. We even talked a little after about it as well. I like to pass on what he said. The original owners grew up in the house. The house had been in the family for generations. With what he could gather, mainly from word of mouth more than anything, the house was super old and had been used as a bed and breakfast at one point during World War II for airmen who worked close by, as there was an airfield not too far from the village. The fridge looked old, maybe around the 80s, but that's a total guess. It wasn't modern though. They could have built the wall, but it was literally the side of the staircase, and he couldn't imagine someone would go to the trouble to take down and rebuild a whole side of the staircase just to put a fridge in the doorway. I had asked him about if the wall maybe had been taken down and then rebuilt, and that's how the fridge got there, so was his answer, and I just wanted to see how old the fridge was. So, thank you again to the HighestBounty for answering my questions and letting me read your story. I really hope no one else finds that basement that got sealed off. Whatever it is, really wants to be left alone. And thank you to everyone as well for listening. It really means a lot to me, guys. If you enjoyed this story as well, please hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, please subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. If you think you know anyone else who would enjoy these stories, please share it with them. As well as, well, I would love a comment. but add the word mystery liquid into your comment so I know you got this far. If you'd like to help in other ways, I do have Patreon as well as YouTube memberships. Please check out my description box for the links to that, as well as my socials and my website. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.